Hi everyone, Cassie here from Primrose Dawn, and welcome to the Delvine Bralette Sew Along. In this series, I will be demonstrating to you how to sew the Delvine Bralette with front D, cradle G, and back I. This first week, I will be talking to you about the different fabrics that can be used in the Delvine Bralette, the trims that you'll need, and some helpful tools that I like to use when sewing bras. We will also be talking about choosing the correct size. So let's get started. Let's begin by talking about the different fabrics that we can use in the cup and cradle. I'm going to show you each of the samples that I made, and I've put them in order of the most stretch to the least stretch. Now, the more stretch in the cups and the cradle, the less support it's going to have. So let's begin with this fabric. This is a Liverpool fabric. This is a polyester spandex blend. And this really has the most amount of stretch that you'll want to use in the cups and the cradle. This has about 30% stretch in the width and about 20% in the length. Now, when I made this sample, this was one of my original prototypes, and I didn't line the cups. And it definitely has the least amount of support in all the samples that I made. If I were going to use this fabric again, I would add a lining to the cups to add more support. But I like the Liverpool fabrics because they usually come in really pretty prints and bright colors, and the texture is kind of interesting. Next, I have one with lace overlays that has a 15 denier sheer nylon fabric in the cups. And I like this fabric because it is really sheer. On the body, you can just barely see it, so mostly the focus is on the lace overlays. But this does also have a lot of stretch. This particular one from Bra Maker Supply has about 30% stretch in the width and 20% stretch in the length. So if you're a larger cup size, this might not be the best option for you. But if you're a smaller to medium cup size like I am, this still provides a decent amount of support. Up next, we have a nylon chiffon fabric from So Sassy. I'm not really sure what the structure of this is. It feels very similar to 15 denier nylon. And this also has about 30% stretch in the width and 10% stretch in the length. And this is one of the pattern hacks that I made for this pattern with the gathered cups. So I added a lining of stabilized tricot to add more support. And also the lining has the dart in it while the front just has gathers. So since it has a lining, this has more support than just if the chiffon fabric was on its own. And then this uses duoplex in the cradle. Next, I have some Dazzle fabric. This is a polyester fabric. This particular one comes from fabricandsewing.com. And it has quite a bit of stretch. This has 30% stretch in the width and 5% stretch in the length. Now I have a different Dazzle fabric. This one comes from Porcelain. And sorry, it's a little cut up. And this one is much more stable. This one has 10% stretch in the width and 5% stretch in the length. And you would be better off using one that has less stretch than more. And it feels nicer, this one from Porcelain. Next, I have some bra tulle that I dyed to match the lace. And this one in particular, this is from the Bra Makery. The holes in the knitting are a bit larger than what I was expecting, but I like it. It has 20% stretch in the width and about 5% stretch in the length. So we're getting into more stable fabrics now. And recently I bought this bra tulle from Bra Builders, and the holes in the mesh are much finer. So I'm liking the look of this one better. I haven't made anything from it yet, but this would be a good option for the cups and cradle as well. Now this one might be hard to see because it's black. This has all lace on the front, so you really can't see the lining. But on the lining on the cups for this one, I used sheer cup lining. And out of all the fabrics I used, this one is the most stable. This is sheer cup lining from Bra Maker Supply. And it only has 5% stretch in both the width and the length, and that's really just mechanical. This is a stabilized tricot. This is the most supportive fabric. I have it in a beige color as well, and it's rather sheer against your skin if you can find it in a color that matches your skin tone. And lastly, I have a prototype that I made in cotton lawn with the cups cut on the bias. I've washed it a few times, so it's a bit wrinkly. And this was just an experiment to really see if it would work, if the cups would wrinkle or lay funny on the body. I didn't have a problem with it looking funny. This fabric got about 10% stretch in the width and the length. And this is just a lightweight cotton lawn. I think it's from Cotton and Steel. And it feels nice to wear. I've worn it several times. I know one of my testers used a bias woven. I can't recall exactly what she used. And she had issues with flat spotting underneath the dart. She was a much larger cup size than me. So if you are a larger cup size, maybe the bias woven wouldn't work well for you, or you'd want to be sure and use something that just had a little bit more stretch. Now for the back band fabrics, nothing too fancy here. Up here we have some power net, and most of my samples use power net. And on this pattern half variation, this is the long line bra. I used tech sheen just to have something a little bit different. It just looks a little different than the power net. You don't really see the holes, and it feels just a little bit firmer than the power net. Now let's talk about the trims that we'll be using. First, you're going to need fold over elastic. Now, I buy my fold over elastic by the roll just because I sew so many bras and panties and use so much of it. I buy it by the roll on eBay from Sale and Bargain, and I've also ordered black and white from Party Ears on Etsy, and it really is worth it to buy it by the roll. You can get it in a lot of different colors. The next thing you'll need is 3/4 inch plush back picot elastic for the band. Now, when I first ordered this, I got it in white, assuming that I would be able to dye it to match my laces. And when I was dyeing my trims, I discovered that it didn't absorb any of the dye, so that means it must have been made from polyester and not nylon, and it didn't take any of the acid dyes I was using. So then I quickly ordered this beige color that matches pretty close to my skin tone, and I used it behind the lace so that you wouldn't be able to see it. And I think I actually like it better than if I had matched the color on the lace, because it really becomes invisible on the body. So consider that when you're ordering your elastic. If you plan on dyeing it, make sure that it is dyeable with whatever dyes that you're using. Next, you'll need 1/2 inch bra strap elastic. This is the plain one, which I used in most of my samples, but on at least one of them, I use this crinkle elastic, and this one is really fun. I ordered this in a few different colors from laceheaven.com, and it's just a little bit different than your typical elastic. I used it on the sample with the gathered cups, and I just thought it was fun, pretty elegant. Next, you'll need a 3-row hook and eye closure. Now, I know most people use the heat-sealed closures that look really nice, but I find those really irritating. Usually those heat-sealed edges just make me itch, so I buy hook and eye tape, and then I cut my own. Here's one that I dyed, and when I attached it, I just use a straight stitch, and then I go around all the edges so that it doesn't fray. And maybe it's not the prettiest looking thing, but it doesn't make me itch, so that's a win in my book. And you'll need 1/2 inch rings and sliders. I like the ones from Porcelain. They're a lot more sturdy, nicer quality. This is from another vendor, and you can see that these are a lot thinner. So these are the ones I like from Porcelain. And if you're going to do back K, which is the halter back, you'll also need a G hook to attach the straps around your neck. Next, I just want to talk for a moment about the stretch lace trim. Now, the size of the stretch lace trim that you use will depend on which style you're using and which size. So there's a chart of the minimum lace widths by size on page 5 of the pattern. And I just want to point out to you that when you're shopping for your lace, you'll want to pay attention to if the pattern pieces can be mirrored on the lace. Now, this lace up at the top here, this is a one-way, one-directional lace, and you wouldn't be able to mirror the pieces. Now, I used this lace on my practice sample here, and I'm trying to use up this lace because when I bought it, I didn't realize that it couldn't be mirrored, so I'm just using it on my practice samples now. And as you can see, the back pieces here aren't mirrored. You have the flower over here, but on this side, it's the leaves and not the flower. And that's because I could only cut the pieces in one direction. You see that the scalloped edges here are different, top and bottom, and the flowers only go in this one direction. So I could cut the piece with the edges going this way, but then I couldn't cut them going the other way. So you have to decide if you want to use a one-directional lace, if that's going to bother you, if it's not mirrored. Now the lace down at the bottom here, this is able to be mirrored. You have the flowers on both edges. They have both the same scalloped edges. And I used this lace, I dyed it turquoise in this sample, and you can see on both the overlays that everything matches. You have the flower pointing this way on this side and pointing this way on this side, and the same for the cups here. So that's just something you want to pay attention to when you're buying your laces. And here are some of my favorite tools that I use when I'm sewing bras. This is transfer paper, and you'll need something to help you transfer the dart lines on this pattern because the legs of the dart are curved, so you can't really just mark the beginning and end points and use a ruler. I'm not sure where you can buy this transfer paper. My mom gave it to me. I think she used it for making stained glass. I haven't had any problems getting the markings out of fabric, but of course you'll want to test it. I find that this leaves a better mark than the Dritz transfer paper. And my other favorite marking tools are Crayola washable markers. I haven't had any problems getting these to wash out of fabrics. You can get them in so many colors, and it just is a lot more useful than those purple pens. I think Dritz makes them that just seem to disappear the next day. And this is a Frisian, I'm not sure how you say it, pen. These markings erase with heat. Now I have heard that the markings can come back when you, if you have something go under freezing temperatures. So I guess if you live in a cold area, you wouldn't want to use these. I started off using these in my quilting projects, and I sometimes use them in my clothing projects as well. This is a chalk marker. I think Dritz makes this. I like it because it leaves a really fine line. It's not as clunky as just the big pieces of chalk that you can use. These are homemade pattern weights. I don't pin my pattern pieces to the fabric. I weigh them down with weights. These are just really big washers. I think I use 3 or 4 at a time. These are the biggest washers I could find at Home Depot. And I just wrapped yarn around them to hold them together. You could also use strips of fabric. This is a magnetic holder I got from Harbor Freight, and it holds my satin pins. Oops, try not to show you one of the bent ones. These are very thin, very fine, very sharp pins. A lot of the bra fabrics snag so easily, and we don't want to get any runs in our delicate fabric, so I recommend satin pins. This is my boob knob. I think this is the top of a newel post. I found it at Home Depot, and my husband drilled it into a piece of wood for me. So when I'm pressing the cups, I usually just lay it on top. And when you want to press open the seam allowance on the dart on this pattern, this really comes in handy. I use duckbill scissors when I'm cutting the seam allowances, trimming them down, because I have cut through my fabrics before, and that's so frustrating because that just ruins your whole project. So be sure you get some very sharp scissors, and it's really helpful when they have the duckbill. I cut everything out with a small rotary cutter. I use the small ones because it's a lot easier to handle the really tight curves. And I've talked about this a little bit in my other videos. This is Otive 505 Temporary Adhesive Spray. This really comes in handy when you're using the lace overlays to attach them to the main cup fabrics. And don't make the mistake that I did before and use quilt basting spray thinking that it's the same thing, because it's not. Quilt basting spray doesn't wash out, and you will just end up with a sticky mess. I ruined a bra by using quilt basting spray because it was just way too sticky on my body, and no matter how many times I washed it, it didn't come out. And I think that's it for my favorite tools. If you have any useful tools to add a comment below. These are the materials I've chosen to use for my sample that I will be demonstrating to you. I'm going to cut the cups from some white raw tulle, the lace overlays from this ivory and blue stretch lace, the cradle from this white dazzle fabric, the back band from this light blue power net, and then I'm going to use this stabilized tricot as the lining for the cradle. Now I do have this in white, but when I get to the part of sewing both layers of the cradle together, I want you to be able to see a difference between the layers. So I picked a sort of contrasting color between this and the dazzle. When you choose your lining fabrics, you'll want it to match as close as possible. And then over here I have my fold over elastic, my 1/2 inch strap elastic, my plush 3/4 inch picot elastic for the band, and my hook and eye tape. Now let's talk about choosing what size you should make. You want to get out your measuring tapes. I've included both metric and imperial measurements. First thing you'll want to do is measure the underbust size to determine your band size. So measure under your bust, around your rib cage, and you'll want to choose the size closest to this measurement. I don't do the adding 4 inches to determine your band size, just because the modern fabrics that we use, we don't need that much ease. Your personal preference will come into play here. If you prefer a really tight or really loose band, you'll just have to pick the measurement closest to what you think will be comfortable for you. My underbust measurement is 31.5, so for myself, I choose a 32-inch band size. Now for the cup size, you're going to measure around the fullest part of your bust and subtract that measurement from your band measurement. And here you'll find the number of inches or the number of centimeters difference and the corresponding cup size. And now below is the size chart of the available sizes. And I tried to make this as inclusive as I could. I know it might not be very big for the larger cup sizes, but I did the best that I could with the sizing. And if you don't see your measurement on here, you could send me a message. Maybe we could play around with adding the sister sizes together to get something that could fit you. That's it for this week. It's time to start gathering your materials. Next week we will be printing the pattern using the layers function. We will be adjusting the dart placement if necessary to fit your body. We will be talking about cutting the lace overlays and making them mirrored so that they are symmetrical. I will show you a couple options for sewing the darts, and we will be sewing the lace overlays to the front. I hope I'll see you next week. Bye for now.